Yo, what's up, Snipers, and welcome back to our Stanley Cup Finals rematch series here in NHL 18. So in last episode, we did the 1996 Stanley Cup Finals rematch between the Colorado Avalanche and the Florida Panthers, and they actually went on to sweep the Florida Panthers like they did in the real matchup. So if you haven't checked that one out, go do that. It was posted I think 2-3 weeks ago. I also apologize that I haven't made one of these in quite a while, just because I have been dealing with a lot of schoolwork and trying to make the rosters and looking up information and all that stuff. But anyways, we're going now 13 years into the future now with the 2009 Stanley Cup Finals between the Detroit Red Wings and the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Pittsburgh Penguins were a really young team full of good young players like Crosby, who was only 21, Malkin, who was 22, Jordan Staal, who was 20. So it was a very young team, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they were looking to win their first Stanley Cup since 1991, I believe. For a very veteran squad, their average age was 31. They were led by players like Zetterberg, Datsuk. They had also Nick Lidstrom still, Brian Rafalski, Chris Osgood. Obviously, this Stanley Cup Finals was a kind of a rematch of the previous season, which was 2008 when Detroit played Pittsburgh. Detroit won that series in 6 games to win a cup, but this year Pittsburgh won the cup in 7 games. During the offseason, Detroit added a lot of pieces to help out trying to go for a second straight Stanley Cup, including they picked up Marian Hossa, who was with the Pittsburgh Penguins the previous season. They also picked up Ty Conklin, who was with Pittsburgh the previous season, as their new backup goaltender. As well, the Penguins picked up a couple good pieces, including Mathieu Guérin from the Edmonton Oilers for that backup role behind Marc-Andre Fleury, and they also picked up veteran Bill Guerin from the New York Islanders. To get to the finals, Detroit had to go through a couple teams like Columbus, Anaheim, and Chicago. Wasn't the most toughest matchups, but then you had Pittsburgh, who had to go through the Flyers, the Capitals, and the Hurricanes. So now, anyways, that's the little intro for this episode. So as you can see, also Detroit's a 91 overall and Pittsburgh is a 92. So it's a very close matchup, hopefully, when we do the actual simulation. Otherwise, let's get into the jerseys for Detroit. Okay, guys, so here's the jerseys for the Detroit Red Wings. As you can see, it's as they always have been. It's not exactly accurate because the white armband on the elbow portion doesn't wrap all the way around like it should. But I couldn't actually get the jerseys to be exactly identical for Detroit. As well, here is the away jersey. It's a bit of a different one as well. Same color scheme though, and it doesn't look too bad. It doesn't look exactly like the real one, like I said, but it should be fine. And obviously, Detroit's never really had an alternate jersey, so I didn't make an alternate. So that's that. Let's flip on over to the jerseys for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Okay, so here are the jerseys for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So these jerseys are the ones that they wore up till 2012, I think. Until they beat San Jose in the Stanley Cup Finals, or not 2012, 2016. I think I said 12, right? I meant 2015-16. But yeah, so these jerseys, they don't look exactly identical because the yellow thing underneath the arm is supposed to go all the way to the bottom of the jersey, but it doesn't on this one, but it's still pretty close to identical. Then their away jerseys just pretty much reversed in color. And then their alternate jersey is the one that they wore during the Winter Classic. Obviously, the logo is not correct, though, because it was a circular logo that said Pittsburgh Penguins and had the Penguins logo in the middle of it. But the jersey color looks really nice. I like actually the light blue with the dark blue. Kind of reminds me of the Winnipeg Jets to an extent. So now that I've shown you guys the jerseys, let's flip on over to the lines for the Detroit Red Wings. Okay, guys, so here is the lines for the Detroit Red Wings. Their average age, like I said, was 31.2 or something like that, because a lot of these players were on the team when they won multiple Stanley Cups. A lot of the guys were there when they won the cup in 1997 against the Philadelphia Flyers, 1998 when they beat Washington, 2002 when they beat Carolina, and then most recently in this would be 2008 when they beat Pittsburgh. So first line, you got Pavel Datsuk. Everybody knows the Magic Man, Pavel Datsuk. He was a 6th round pick back in 1998, I think. And then you got Henrik Zetterberg, who was a 7th round pick in 2000 or 1999, something like that. So 2 big first round steals, very good players in both ends of the ice, really good defensively, good forwards. So those are Datsuk and Zetterberg. You guys should know them. Then you got Dan Cleary, who is from Newfoundland. He's one of the only newfies to win a Stanley Cup, other than Michael Ryder, who I believe won it with Boston in 2011. He actually had a pretty good playoffs too. He wasn't a really gifted goal scorer, but he had 9 goals during the entire Stanley Cup playoffs. Then on the second line, you got Johan Franzen. Johan Franzen was another really good player. He came into the NHL in 05-06 at age 24, I think it was, or 25. He was playing over in Sweden a lot, but most recently, like a couple of years ago, he ran into injury troubles, and I think he's kind of retired now, and he's still making his contract too, which a lot of Red Wings fans don't like to an extent, but he was a really good player when he was playing. Like, I remember actually, I don't remember what year it was, but I went to a Sens Detroit game. This guy had like 5 goals in the game, so it was a pretty crazy game. Nonetheless, so now let's get on to the center, and that is Valtteri Filppula. So Filppula still plays in the NHL, obviously as a member of the Philadelphia Flyers. He also went to the Stanley Cup Finals as a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2015. He's a pretty solid two-way guy. He's got great face-offs, all that sort of stuff. Then on his right side, you got Marian Hossa, who came over from the Pittsburgh Penguins the previous season. So Hossa is kind of an interesting story because in 2008, he actually went to the Cup Finals like with Pittsburgh against Detroit, which he lost in. Then he came over to Detroit to try and win that Stanley Cup, and he ended up losing to his former team. And then he would finally win his first Stanley Cup in 2010 as a member of the Chicago Blackhawks, so the year right after this. And yeah, he's won a couple other ones with Chicago since then. Then on the third line, you got Yuri Hudler. Yuri Hudler, a pretty good two-way guy. He won the Lady Byng, I think it was in 14-15, when he was with the Calgary Flames. He also most recently played for Florida and Dallas. I don't know if he still plays for Dallas. He might be a free agent by now, but I'm 100% sure with that. He is pretty just like good defensively player. He could score goals too, got good speed, whatnot. Then in the center, you got Chris Draper. Chris Draper's been here for all 4 of their Stanley Cup wins from 1997 onwards. So yeah, he was a pretty good two-way guy, good face-off man, kind of almost like a JG Pageau to an extent, but he wasn't as, like, he was not really, well, he was kind of like a JG Pageau to an extent. I don't know how to explain him really otherwise. He's just like, he throws he puts up goals, he plays good shorthanded minutes, I think, that type of idea. Then on his right side, you have another guy that's been there for all 4 Stanley Cups, I believe, and that is Kirk Maltby. He was originally drafted by the Edmonton Oilers, played like 2 seasons there before coming to Detroit, and then he won 4 Stanley Cups with them from 1997 onwards as well. He was also a pretty similar player to Chris Draper in the stats, like he was a good defensive guy, and then he could also somewhat score goals too. He picked up more penalty minutes than Draper, but he was still a pretty good two-way guy. Then on the left side here, on the fourth line, we got Thomas Holmstrom. Just so you guys know, these lines are from Game 7, so Thomas Holmstrom could have played on other lines too, but this is the lines from Game 7. Thomas Holmstrom also won, I think, 4 Stanley Cups with Detroit. He came into the league in 1996-97 when Detroit won their first cup since probably a long time before then. I don't even know when it was, but yeah, he won his first Stanley Cup in his rookie season. Then you got Darren Helm, who is one of the youngest players on the team at this point in time, 22 years of age. He just came into the NHL the year before. He obviously still plays for Detroit. He's a good face-off man, good two-way guy. He's got lots of speed. That's Darren Helm. Then you got Mikael Samuelsson, who also went to the Stanley Cup Finals as a member of the Vancouver Canucks in 2011. He only played the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, so I believe against Nashville and Chicago, and didn't actually play in the final 2 rounds, but he was still a pretty solid two-way guy. He was also a bit of a power forward because he's got a bit of weight to him. He could score goals somewhat too, so it was decent in both ends of the ice. Then for scratch forwards, you got Justin Abdelkader. He actually played the first 2 games of the series, or the first 4 games actually, because he was basically replaced by Datsuk when Datsuk came back from a injury that he had, like a foot problem. So Abdelkader was that guy that played on Detroit for the first couple games. He had 2 goals in the first 2 games of the series. One of them was a game winner, I think, or both of them might have been game winners. So he still plays with Detroit currently, but he's making a big salary. A lot of people don't like his thing because of that. He's making, like, I don't know how much he's making, but he's making a big stupid contract. Then you got Ville Leino. Ville Leino was a bit of a one-hit wonder. He had one really good season with the Philadelphia Flyers. I think it was the year they went to the Stanley Cup Finals, or maybe it was a different year. But Vilhelmina was a good player with the Flyers, and then all of a sudden when he went to Buffalo, he had one season where he did not score a single goal in like 58 games played. So he turned out to be a bit of a bust, and eventually he would leave the NHL for Europe. Then you got Thomas Kopecky. Thomas Kopecky was not a part of the team that won the Cup the year before this, apparently. But he did win his first Stanley Cup in 2010 with Marian Hossa as a member of the Chicago Blackhawks. He was another kind of power forward guy, big player, 6'3", 210. And yeah, that was Thomas Kopecky. Defensive core for the Detroit Red Wings, you got Brad Stewart, who scored the first goal of the Stanley Cup Finals. When he took like a wrist shot from the point, it bounced off the end boards right off the back of Marc-Andre Fleury and into the net. Another solid two-way kind of guy. He was actually, I believe, a part of the Joe Thornton trade when Joe Thornton was sent to San Jose. Stewart and I think Wayne Primo and a couple other guys were sent back to Boston in exchange. Marco Sturm, I believe, too. So yeah, that's Brad Stewart. Then his defense partner, you got Nicholas Kronwall, who was kind of in one of his first seasons, I think, in the NHL. Well, maybe not really. I think this is actually like his 5th season. But still, anyways, Nick Kronwall, obviously you guys know him still because he plays for the Detroit Red Wings. Great hitter, great defensive player. Doesn't score, I think, a whole lot, but he was a good passer, that sort of idea. Then on the second pairing, you got Nicholas Lidstrom, obviously the best defenseman in Red Wings history, probably. Lidstrom was a very good player in the playoffs, obviously, picking up a lot of assists. At this point in time, though, he was 38 years of age, so he wasn't, obviously, like, he was still putting up points, but he's getting old by this point in time, but still a very good, reliable defenseman to have. He almost came close to tying the game up in Game 7 in the dying seconds, but Marc-Andre Fleury drove across to make the save. His defense partner, and that is Brian Rafalski. Brian Rafalski also won a few cups with the New Jersey Devils in his career. Another good two-way defenseman, but he was also 35. So he was also getting to that point where he was going to retire. I think he actually retired maybe a couple seasons after this, or maybe he did retire at the end of the season. I'm not 100% sure with that, but yeah, Brian Rafalski was a very good solid piece to this team. Then you got Brad Lebda, and Brad Lebda is not really anything huge. He ended up getting into the NHL like at an older age, like 23, 24, and he didn't really play that much. He's just more of a depth guy kind of, but he's on the top 6 pairing with Jonathan Ericsson. Like I said, not much of anything. He gets skate probably because he's 5'9", 195, so not a biggest guy. I think he had a decent amount of penalty minutes as well, so he was a bit of an agitator. So yeah, that's Brett Lebda. Then you got Jonathan Ericsson, and Jonathan Ericsson actually during this point in time was actually a pretty solid defenseman. Like in the Stanley Cup Finals, I think he had 2 goals, including one in Game 7, and then he had like 4 during the entire playoffs, maybe like 9 or 10 points. Like this guy was actually pretty solid back in those days. A player that's like 6'4", 220. Nowadays, a lot of people in the Red Wings, like Red Wings fans, don't think he's that good because he turns the puck over a lot, and he's making a pretty stupid contract too. So Jonathan Ericsson, he was good in his early years, but now he's not that much. So that's Ericsson. Then on to scratch defenders, we got Derek Meach. Derek Meach actually, after playing with Detroit, he went to the Winnipeg Jets, where he was actually born in Winnipeg, so he got to end his career pretty much in 2012, I think it was, with his hometown team, so pretty cool for him to do that. Kind of like a guy like Mark Methot to that extent, because Mark Methot played with the Sens for so many years, and he's from Ottawa. Then we also have the oldest player in the NHL at this point in time, and probably almost one of the oldest players that's ever played in the NHL, and that is Chris Chelios, who is 47, I think, at this point in time. Maybe he was even 48. I don't know if it included. I think he was 47. But anyways, he only played 6 games in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Didn't put up a single point because he was getting old. Obviously, at 47, you're not going to put up much points, but during his entire career, he was a very good two-way kind of guy. He also got a lot of penalty minutes in his career too, so he was a bit of an agitator nonetheless, but one of the best American defensemen by far. Then in goal, you got Chris Osgood. Chris Osgood was there for all 4 Stanley Cups, just like Nick Lidstrom was, I forgot to mention. So yeah, Chris Osgood, definitely a really good goaltender. He had a very good record during the playoffs and a good save percentage, better than Marc-Andre Fleury's, even at 35, but he couldn't get it done in the Stanley Cup Finals. He is a very good passer as well for a goaltender. Like, he was always jumping up in the play and putting up passes. I think he had 1 assist in the Stanley Cup Finals as well. And then also in his career, he actually scored a goal on an empty net at one point in time. I think he's only got 1 goal. But he was also a very good passer, like I was saying, just a guy that goes and plays the puck behind the net a lot. And then you got Ty Conklin, and Ty Conklin was in our 2006 Stanley Cup Finals rematch as a member of the Edmonton Oilers. Just not the greatest goaltender, more of a backup guy. He originally was born in Alaska. And yeah, he was just more of a backup kind of guy. Like I said, he was with Pittsburgh the previous season to this too. So that is Ty Conklin, and that is also the Detroit Red Wings. So now let's flip on over to the lines for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Okay, so here are the lines for the youthful Pittsburgh Penguins. So starting off on the left side, we got Chris Kunitz. He also went to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2007 as a member of the Anaheim Ducks. Speaking of which, that is our next episode for the series. So the Sens and the Ducks from 2007 should be a fun one, because being a Sens fan that I am, I remember that Stanley Cup Finals pretty clearly. So anyways, there's Chris Kunitz, obviously a good player with Pittsburgh for many years. And now he's in Tampa Bay, who might win the Stanley Cup this year, obviously. So there's Chris Kunitz. Then at center, you got the 21-year-old Sidney Crosby, arguably the best player in the league at the moment. He's getting old, though. Now he's like 30. Yeah, I think he's like 30 now. So he's not the oldest still, but still Crosby's getting up there in age. Obviously a very good player in his entire career. Then on his right side, you got Bill Guerin, who, like I said, was acquired from the New York Islanders the season before this. He did not retire until 2010, so the year after this, but he was still a good player for the most part of his career. One of those right-wing power forwards that get a lot of penalty minutes, but he could also shoot the puck and score too, so he was a pretty solid player in both ends of the ice. Then on the second line, you got Ruslan Fedotenko. Fedotenko was a clutch player for Tampa Bay when they won the Cup in 2004. He had 2 goals in that Game 7 that clinched the Stanley Cup. He also played for the New York Islanders, the Philadelphia Flyers, a couple other teams, and I think he's retired now. I could be wrong with that, but he's like one of the only NHL players that's from Ukraine. So that's kind of interesting. So there's Ruslan Fedotenko. Then at center, you got 22-year-old Evgeny Malkin. I put him as a high elite, so don't expect it's just an elite. I put him as a high elite because obviously Crosby's a franchise player, but Malkin, he's living most of his career apparently in Crosby's shadow a bit, but Malkin is a very good player. During the Stanley Cup Finals, he actually had like 34 points to win the Conn Smythe at age 22. Crosby had like 30-something points as well. Both these guys were beasts during the entire playoffs to get them that Stanley Cup. Then on the right side, you got Max Talbot, or Maxime Talbot, depending on what you want to call him. Max Talbot was, in his later parts of his career, he was more of a defensive bottom 6 guy. He's now actually playing in Europe, so he's not even in the NHL. But during this Stanley Cup Finals, he was a pretty clutch player because he had 2 goals in Game 7, the only 2 goals to win Pittsburgh the Stanley Cup. And obviously playing with Malkin and Fedotenko gave the kid a lot of chances. He was only 24 at this point in time. Then on the third line here, you got Matt Cook, and Matt Cook, obviously a lot of people don't like him. I don't like him personally because of his Erik Karlsson thing where he did in 2013, where his skate hit the Achilles tendon of Karlsson and took him out for pretty much the entire season. So yeah, Matt Cook, not one of those players I like. But when he was with Vancouver, he was a pretty solid offensive player. But then eventually later in his career, he just became that bottom 6 guy that just grinds out, gets into fights a lot, all that type of stuff. Then at center, you got Jordan Staal, who is only 20 years old at this point in time. Jordan Staal, obviously the brother of Eric and Mark and Jared too. So yeah, Jordan Staal, I think this was his 3rd season in the NHL, wins his first Stanley Cup at this point in time. So you can see the center core here in Pittsburgh is really young. The average age is like 21 years old, so a very good young center core. Then on the right side, you got another young player, and that is Tyler Kennedy. He was only 22 in the Stanley Cup Finals. He's actually retired now in the NHL. Like, I think he retired at age 30. So kind of an interesting story that he retired so young, but he was a pretty solid player. Both ends of the ice, a short guy, so he could skate well as well. Then on the fourth line, you got Pascal Dupuis. Pascal Dupuis just retired, I think at the end of the 2016 season when they won the Cup against the Sharks, because he had some sort of like blood clot problem in his leg that kept him out for most of the season. And yeah, I guess his life it's a life-threatening injury or something. Maybe not life-threatening. I could be exaggerating a bit, but still, there's Pascal Dupuis. Then at center, you got Craig Adams, who's one of the older players on the team. Craig Adams also won the Cup in our 2006 Stanley Cup Finals rematch as a member of the Carolina Hurricanes. Just another bottom six kind of grinder, defensive player. Well, he wasn't the greatest defensively, but he was still a great grinder nonetheless. Then on his right side, you got Miroslav Shatan. Miroslav Shatan was also in the 1999 Stanley Cup Finals video that we did. As a member of the Buffalo Sabres, he was looking for his first chance at a Stanley Cup because he has yet to, at this point in time, he had yet to win a Stanley Cup at age 33, but then he finally got it done there with Pittsburgh, and he came close to winning one, I think, with Boston in 2013, and then that's when he retired. Then our scratch forward is Peter Sikora. Peter Sikora, another one of those older kind of veteran guys, but Peter Sikora won a couple cups as a member of the New Jersey Devils, I think, and then he also came close to winning cups with like Anaheim, Edmonton he played with in 2007, but he didn't come close to winning a cup then. So yeah, Peter Sikora, just another one of those solid kind of players. Kind of a big guy. He could skate, he could shoot the puck and score goals. Like, I think he was like a consistent like kind of 20 goal scorer for the most part of his career. Then on to the defensive core, we got Brooks Orpik. Brooks Orpik obviously still plays, just another good defensive defenseman, big guy that throws a lot of hits. Still plays for Washington at the moment. Then his defense partner, we got Sergei Gonchar, a very good player in the playoffs, putting up a lot of points, great passer. He could score as well, good slap shots from the point, good catalyst to have on your power play. He actually went to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1998 as well as a member of the Washington Capitals against Detroit, but lost. And this was his first, I think this was his first ever Stanley Cup too, nonetheless. So yeah, a very good player in Sergei Gonchar. Then on the second defensive pairing, you got Hal Gill. Hal Gill was a pretty solid defenseman, not a guy that could score a lot because he's 6'7", 243 pounds. Very big guy. And yeah, he's basically like, I guess you could say like a Zdeno Chara. He doesn't score that much or get that much of offensive stats, but he's just a really good checker, a guy that could just play solid minutes on your penalty kill, all that type of stuff. Then as pairing, you got Rob Scuderi. Rob Scuderi was in the early stages of his career at this point in time, even though he was already 30. He won a couple cups as well as a member of the Los Angeles Kings back in 2012, and I think he was also part of the team that won in 2014. Just as solid for the most part of his career. Then on the third line here, you got Mark Eaton. He was more of a defensive kind of guy as well. However, in the Stanley Cup Finals, he had like a couple goals, so I did make him better than, or just as good as people like Brooks Orpik and better than Hal Gill. I don't know really how to explain this type of guy because he was not the most gifted defenseman. So, anyways, that's Mark Eaton. Then as defense partner, you got the young Christopher Letang, who is only 21 at this point in time, just like Crosby was. Obviously, you guys know Chris Letang, very good two-way defenseman. I put him as a high top 4 because I don't know if he's really an elite player, but he's a very good player nonetheless. He had, I think, at least one goal in the Stanley Cup Finals to help the Pittsburgh Penguins win a Stanley Cup. Then our scratch defenders here, you got Philip Boucher. Philip Boucher played most of his career with the Dallas Stars, and I think he played some with Los Angeles, but he never won a cup until this year with the Pittsburgh Penguins, finally getting it done at age 35. Then you also got the young Alex Goligoski. Goligoski was already 23, but just getting started in the NHL. Obviously, he still plays as a member of the Arizona Coyotes. He's more of a offensively minded defenseman because he's really small and he can skate well. He's not the greatest hitter either, being only 5'11", 185, so not too bad of a player, and that is our defensive core for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now finally onto the goaltenders, you got Marc-Andre Fleury. As I said on when I was talking about Nick Lidstrom, he made a big save in the dying seconds to win Pittsburgh the Stanley Cup. He didn't actually have the greatest playoffs. Like, he had a winning record, but it wasn't the greatest winning record. And his save percentage and goals against was like 2.6 and like a .90 something, so he wasn't the greatest bet at this point in time, but he still won his team a Stanley Cup, so he made some clutch saves at clutch moments to team win, and that's what matters most, I guess. And in his backup, you got Mathieu Guérin, who, like I said, came over from the Edmonton Oilers this season. Don't really know how to explain Guérin. He was just more of a fringe starter. Like, he played with Tampa Bay as a starter. I think he was also the Oilers starter maybe this season. I don't know for sure. But he just was like more of like a fringe starter type of guy, mostly a backup. He played his entire career with Montreal, Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, Edmonton, and Tampa Bay, I believe. I think that was it. So that's Mathieu Guérin in the Pittsburgh Penguins, and that is our line. So now let's get into our playoff simulation. Will the veteran Detroit Red Wings be able to win their second straight Stanley Cup, or will the youthful Pittsburgh Penguins win their first Stanley Cup like they actually did? So let's get into the simulation. Okay, here we go, boys. Let's see how it happens. So will the Detroit Red Wings be able to repeat as Stanley Cup champions? We're going to actually slow sim the entire game, all the games in this series, just because Jay Brown, Sabres fan, he said he wanted me to sim the entire game, so that's what we're going to do from now on, even though it's going to add a bit more time. And Jonathan Ericsson is going to open in scoring in the Stanley Cup Finals. So in this actual game, I think Detroit won by a score of 3-1. I might put up like a box score of the game, like just in post editing, just so you guys could see what actually happened. But I think it was Detroit won the first 2 games of the series, and then Pittsburgh won the 2 in Pittsburgh, and then Detroit won the next game, and then Pittsburgh tied the series up, and then won 1 in Detroit as well to win in 7 games. So Hudler makes it 2-0, but Max Talbot, the clutch guy, makes it a 2-1 game here in the second period. Okay, so 2-1 Detroit after 1. This might be the same score as the actual game 1 if Detroit could score another. And they're going to Pavel Datsyuk 3-1. If Pittsburgh can't score any goals, this might be the exact recreation almost of the first game, except for the same players didn't score. Datsyuk obviously wasn't in game 1 because he was injured. Like I said, Justin Abdelkader would have been the guy to score at the point in time. So it was a 3-1 victory, I think, just like it was in real life. So Eriksson from Holmstrom, Hudler from Hossa and Filppula, Talbot from Fedotenko Malkin. That line usually gets the most points for Pittsburgh. And then Datsyuk from Zetterberg. 3 stars in game 1. Osgood gets first star, Eriksson the second star, and Yuri Hudler the third star. Okay, into game number 2 now. Detroit leads the series 1-0. Was a pretty close first game for the most part. 3-1 victory for Detroit. Let's see what happens here in game number 2. Power play early for Detroit, but they don't capitalize on it. Detroit's getting a lot of shots here. Power play for Pittsburgh. They don't score. And there you go. Johan Franzen opens the scoring for Detroit. But Pittsburgh's going to answer right back. Rob Scuderi of everybody. And then Ruslan Fedotenko giving Pittsburgh the lead, and Kunitz making it a 3-1 lead. Wow, it looks like Pittsburgh might tie the series up here. Detroit shouldn't lose any home games except for Game 7 if it goes to Game 7. Sidney Crosby's going to make it a 4-1 lead for Pittsburgh. Detroit's just shitting the bed here, but Draper's going to make it 4-2. So Detroit's back in this game if they could get another power play, and they're not going to score on it. But they're going to score there. Dan Cleary. As I said, Dan Cleary had 9 goals in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So he was a good piece for this team, and he has pulled Detroit within 1 goal going into the third. Is Pittsburgh going to buckle from a 4-1 lead, or is Detroit going to pull in it? And Filppula ties it up, and it's 4-4. Shots are even too, so wow. Detroit's battled back from a 4-1 deficit. And will they be able to come through with the win here? Fedotenko with a clutch goal. That's why I put his poise up, and it's a 5-4 lead for Pittsburgh now. And they're going to get it done. So Pittsburgh has tied the series up, and we're going back to Pittsburgh with a tie series. So a pretty good game. Looks like mostly that second line again for Pittsburgh seems to get it done. Not going to read all those stats, but there's the box score, the 3 stars, Fedotenko, Kunitz, and Malkin. Hopefully Malkin can win another Conn Smythe. That would be nice. Make it more realistic. So we have a 1-1 series going back to Pittsburgh. As I expected, this is an even series because Detroit's overall is like a 91 and Pittsburgh's like a 92. So this should be a really tight matchup, so it still should go to 7 games. But we'll see how game number 3 plays out as we're back in the Mellon Arena. That's what it was called back in those days. Well, it was in a different arena actually, I think, as well, because I don't know if Mellon Arena exists anymore. But it used to be called the Civic Arena back when Pittsburgh had Mary Lemieux and stuff like that in the 90s. And after an offensive game last game, it is a scoreless first period. Shots are 9-6 though in favor of the Pens. Who's going to break the ice here in game 3? Still nobody so far, and Nick Lidstrom is going to score to make it 1-0 Detroit, beating Marc-Andre Fleury with a shot from in tight too. Pittsburgh looking to tie it up, but they're not going to score on that power play chance. Shots are in the Pens' favor, but it is a 1-0 lead for Detroit going into the third. Looks like Osgood's having a good bounce back game from letting in 5 goals, and Rafalski's going to score. So another defenseman for Detroit coming through. Their defensive core is really strong. Halfway through the third period, still 2-0 Detroit. Looks like they're going to take a 2-1 series lead headed back to Pittsburgh again for game 4. Yep, a great performance from Osgood, bouncing back from that 5-4 loss. So Lidstrom from Franzen and Zetterberg, Rafalski from Zetterberg, and Samuelson. So Detroit has got the series lead. Osgood with 33 saves, Fleury gets 2nd star, and Zetterberg the 3rd star. So game 4, Pittsburgh has got to win this game or else Detroit will have a chance to win the Stanley Cup on home ice. And they're usually a killer team on home ice, and Zetterberg's going to score early to make it 1-0 Detroit. Pittsburgh, you can't let this game get away from you this early. They're getting outshot a lot too, power play, and they're going to let in a shorthanded goal, I think. Chris Draper makes it 2-0 Detroit here in the first period. Pittsburgh, you got to get back in this if you want this cup, guys. And there you go, Crosby makes it a 2-1 game. So it's still anybody's game after 1. Pittsburgh looking now to tie the game up. Shots are close as well, and Cleary makes it 3-1 Detroit. Not looking good for the Penguins here. They still have a chance though. They still have time to get 2 goals. They're getting a lot more chances too. Last 5 minutes of the second period, and Fedotenko with a clutch goal to pull them back within 1 once again late in the period. Fedotenko's been really good so far. Shots are 20-17 in favor of the Penguins and are down by 1 goal. Will they tie it up here in the third period? Or will Detroit take a 3-1 series lead headed back home? Power play for Pittsburgh. They got to score on this, but they don't get it done. Power play for Detroit, and they don't get it done. Last 5 minutes here of the third period. Time winding down. Pittsburgh needs 1 goal at least. And they're not going to get it done as Brad Stewart Brad Stewart gets the nail in the coffin, and the Detroit Red Wings have taken a 3-1 series lead. So this is kind of not realistic to an extent, but Pittsburgh might come back, you never know. So Zetterberg from Franzen and Datsuk, Draper unassisted, Crosby from Malkin and Letang, Cleary from Zetterberg and Datsuk, Fedotenko from Talbot and Malkin, and Stewart from Datsuk and Zetterberg. And 3 stars, Zetterberg, Datsuk, and Osgood. So this might be our first Stanley Cup Finals that has a different outcome than the actual Stanley Cup Finals, because all our other ones, the actual team has won. So if Pittsburgh could come back from this, that would be great, but they'd have to win in 7 games like they did in real life. So let's see if the Detroit Red Wings could repeat as Stanley Cup champions here in Game 5 on home ice, or will Pittsburgh force a Game 6 back at the Mellon Arena? Looks like a pretty even game so far, and Pittsburgh's going to score first. That's what you want to do, guys. Billy Guerin with 2 goals after the first period, looks like almost. Yes, after the first period, it's 2-0 Pittsburgh. Shots 9-8 in favor of them as well. They need to get an insurance marker as well, because 2-0 lead is not really that safe against an offensive team like Detroit, and Cleary makes it a 2-1 game. Dan Cleary's been good for Detroit as well. 3 goals so far, I think, in this Stanley Cup Finals. Last 5 minutes of the second period. Pittsburgh, you need to get another one. You can't just hold on to this lead. Doesn't always work. So we're here in the third period, and Filppula is going to tie the game up. Wow, they blew a 2-0 lead 10 minutes left here in the third. We're going to go into 4-time simulation just in case Detroit scores a goal. Last 9 minutes. Power play for Detroit. They don't get it done. If it goes to an overtime, we're going to intervene and watch overtime. Last 4 minutes. Time's winding down. Are we headed to OT? Okay, I'm going to intervene. Yeah, we're going to overtime. So we're going to intervene and watch overtime just in case Detroit has a goal to win the Stanley Cup. Otherwise, I'm going to let you guys watch, and maybe there's a Stanley Cup celebration in this game. If not, we will go right to the next game afterwards. So there you go, start game, and I'll let you guys watch and see you guys in here in a second.
If you're just with us, it's been a tremendous bit of hockey so far, and more to come. The Penguins will begin this period still shorthanded. Gets in. What'll he do? Taken to the corner by Zetterberg. Lets it go. Dumped in. The Penguins shoot it back out. Got some time to check the clock and prepare to defend again. On to Datsu. A terrific shot, but it's answered by the pad.
Filppula's offensive production doesn't slow down in the playoffs at all. They do everything they can to get in his face and take away his ice, but he's able to somehow squeak away, bull his way to some extra space to deliver a scoring chance.
Beat him on that one. Loose puck due to the play. Oh, what a move. And angled to Eriksson. And at an angle to Filppula. Shoots, grabbed.
The goalie gave him the glove side, and he took it away. What a stop.
Good face-off win. Gives it over to the point. Nice tip of the pass. The stick can break up a play, and it just did. He throws it there, off his helmet mask.
Zetterberg's point streak is getting notoriety around the league. When you're on a hot streak that lasts this long, everybody notices. Everybody wonders when it's going to end.
Quick work on the faceoff. Flips that wrist shot. Eakins got it in his own end, headed towards center. So on this power play, they will resume from their own end of the ice. Oh, broke it up. Perfect receipt of the pass. Again, slides to Filppula. Looking for options. Great glove save.
Oh, if you're a shooter, you don't want to see the goaltender flash his glove like that.
Good reach there. Cleared back out. Not much pressure. The Red Wings go back to pick it up. Time is dwindling on this power play. Wonderful block. Pittsburgh's penalty kill was significant.
That is one long stretch in the sin bin there, as all you can do is hope that you get another shift. The penalty killers do their job, and the game will continue.
The Red Wings have control of the puck at center ice. Pitching it to Datsyuk. No completion on that pass thanks to the defender. Puck loose, couldn't get through. And he shoots. Those big pillows on his legs came in handy then. Takes that pass from the other point. Chip to Franzen. Oh, the pass just didn't work. Faces up to the point. Still no shot. Up the boards with it now. Picked up by Lidstrom. Slid. A lightning-like glove save. A penalty has been called, and the game could hinge on this. Pittsburgh's 2-minute penalty is a minor, and the call is hooking.
The referees are looking for this. Anytime you stop skating and reach with your stick and pull on the opponent, you're going to the penalty box.
Oftentimes, it's not your percentage on the power play, but when you do get one that makes the biggest difference. That might be the case right here this time. Nice face-off work. He lost it down to a knee. Slugged back out again by Kennedy. Controlled by Eriksson. Pitching this one to Hossa. Gets in, looks on here. He missed the net.
I don't see too many guys getting away of blocking that shot.
Got his stick on it. And possession snapped up by Orpin. Good job of clearing. Laid on to Filppula. That one is pointed to him. Turned a shot on net. Right in that catching glove. Good work. Just over 3 minutes have passed here in overtime. Both teams have connected twice. Possession established. Good reach there. Pittsburgh's gotten it back out. They check the clock, get ready to defend. And now it's directed to Hossa. He's in on an onside play. Propelled to Hossa. He takes that point pass. Shoots! That shot came from nowhere.
You talk about cutting down the angle. Perfectly executed by the goaltender.
Phenomenal pressure applied here in overtime. Score! The Stanley Cup winning goal in overtime!
They have battled losing streaks and injuries. They've had times when their goaltending has failed or their scoring has been absent. Yet at the end of the road, they are Stanley Cup champions as they bonded together to become the best team in hockey. I'm not really sure where this tradition originated, but it's one that separates our sport, I believe, from a lot of the others. The players come together, congratulate each other on a hard-fought series, but it doesn't mean that you actually like the guy that you're shaking hands with.
The man-chosen playoff MVP gets the Conn Smythe Trophy. Boy, is this ever well-deserved.
I'm always interested in the way the player reacts to getting this trophy. It's almost like they want to get out of there so they can celebrate the Stanley Cup. You've been selected as the best player in the playoffs, but really all you can think about is that your team is champions.
It's often said it's the hardest prize to win because it takes 8 weeks. And by tradition, the captain is the first to hold it high.
I can guarantee you that picture right there with the cup up over his head will be displayed prominently in his home. One moment he can be proud of and will cherish forever. There's so much going on the ice right now. I wonder if the players are able to soak it all in, or if it goes by so fast that the time that they really understand is when they look at it on video later on. This is outstanding to see how happy these players are.
You play that hard and that long. You get your names on a trophy, rings on your fingers, And one last photograph. Evidence of it all.
Okay guys, there you have it. The Detroit Red Wings have won back-to-back Stanley Cups, so a different outcome for the first time in the series. Detroit just overpowered them, and then also in overtime, 2 penalties Pittsburgh took. One was the one at the end of the simulation, but a goal in on the second penalty. Who was in the box again? I think it was Hal Gill that got the penalty. Yuri Hudler is going to get the Stanley Cup winner. He just gets a slap shot from the point, and Fleury's way out of position. I don't know if he got bumped there. Might be an arguable call there, but they didn't call it. See, like, Hudler just gets a shot, but why is Fleury way out of position? Did his own man knock him down? That's the question here. So it looks like Fleury's bouncing around for the puck here, and then he goes down for some reason here, but he puts himself in a really bad predicament because he can't see where the shot is, and it's already coming towards the net too at this point in time. So he just got screened really well, doesn't get bumped at all, and then he can't make a recovery to get the save. So Detroit's won the Stanley Cup. 3 stars, like I was just showing. Guerin with the 2 goals. Pittsburgh had a 2-0 lead at this point in time too, but then Hossa gets 2 assists as well to help his team get back in it, and Cleary with a goal as well. So final shots 46-20 in favor of Detroit. Also, Henrik Zetterberg won the Conn Smythe, which is kind of accurate to an extent, because if Detroit actually would have won the cup, he had, I think, just over a point per game in the playoffs, so like 24 and 23, so he could have been that guy that won it, either him or Osgood. Let's just take a little recap and look at the player stats. Zetterberg had 8 points in 5 games, so that first line got it done for Detroit. Datsuk 6 points. Malkin had 5 points, so he was playing great enough to maybe win a Conn Smythe as well for Pittsburgh. At least that line played good. Talbot had 3 points, so it's decently accurate, except for the fact that Pittsburgh lost the cup. Osgood was 4-1-0, 933 save percentage, 1.98, and Fleury played like crap. So, but he had a good save percentage. It's not a bad save percentage, considering you're playing against a veteran team like Detroit. So, anyways, guys, that's going to do it for our Stanley Cup Finals rematch episode. So, like I said, next episode is going to be the 2007 Stanley Cup Finals between the Ducks and the Sens. So look forward to that in maybe 3 weeks or so, or early in 2018. And then I'll probably do a poll eventually again on what you guys want to see for the next one, or I might just do one off the top of my head and then get you guys to vote for the following episode and so on like that. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. See you guys next time.